Scary EIRE. EIRE is the Irish or Gaelic word for Ireland. Paranormal means all the things that are impossible to explain by known natural forces or by science. And Ireland is steeped in lore, ghosts, blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, hunger, desperation, and charm. Oh, and the paranormal. Welcome to Scary EIRE.
Not paranormal. Mark Manning is real. Now that's a scary thought.
Oh, I'm very real, all right. I haven't gone away, you know. Hello and welcome to the second episode right here on Paranormal UK Radio of Scary EIRE. It's good to be back, and indeed I was honoured this week to be interviewed on the Paranormal Radio Show, the flagship itself, with Irene and Mark. Right now I think they're beginning to regret having me on board. Oh yes, they're conspiring away. She's going, "That Markle Farkle guy, I don't like him, you know, he's got too much to say for himself." And Mark is going, "Yeah, I think maybe we got a bit more than we can chew with this guy. Let's plan something. Guys, you can plan away, because I'm Teflon, and this show is here to stay, I would hope." Now then, on tonight's, or this morning's, I don't know what the time zone is you're listening to me in, is. Anyway, we've got a few items to get through in the next hour or so. For instance, we'll be finding out about ghostly goings-on in a newsroom. Also, the Irish TikTok sensation that is Neil Murray, the TikTok taxi man. He'll be joining us as well as he looks in his rear-view mirror at his life and comes up with a few tales of his own. And of course, where would we be without the fantastic presence of the Squire, David McGlynn, who'll be here to tell us all about the kind of origins of the gangs of New York back here in Ireland, as well as hanging postmen. And let's not forget about the BANSHEE. Ever wondered what that phenomenon is? It's all curiouser and curiouser, is it not? So you're very welcome on board the Scary EIRE Ghost Train. Now then, one of the most unusual places I've ever heard a paranormal experience take place is in the environs, which I'm kind of familiar with, of a radio station. And on the other end of the line, I have the household name, she's very modest about it, newsreader Bernie Jameson. Hi, Bernie.
Hi, Mark. How are you? You're very kind. Very strange occurrences that happened in a radio station, and are we allowed to say the name of this particular radio station?
Of course. Take me back to the year and the station.
I can't remember the exact year now, but it was Today FM, and it was Abbey Street linking into Jervis Street, where Abbey Street meets Jervis Street down the end, a very old part of Dublin. Just to give you a little bit of a time frame, we were about to move out and move over to the other side of the city, over to Marconi House, over near Stephen's Green. Some people say that when there's either moving in or moving out of a building, that it can stir things up. So maybe that might be responsible for what happened here. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you my story. I was on the late night news shift. You know, I was the only live human voice to be heard, really, I suppose, at that time. I was there until midnight. The sports presenter was the last person to go home. The last live DJ had gone home earlier, and the last show was pre-recorded. So I was concentrating on my work. I just wanted to get it done and get out of there. You know, it was a big old building, with big sash windows. I had them open to let some air circulate. So there was a little bit of noise coming in from outside, like the Lewis going by, that kind of thing. But I was just concentrating on my work. But I suppose eventually, as I was working, I seemed aware that something else was going on in this room with just me on my own working. And it was found as if someone was humming a song nearby. this kind of slow, sad, but contented kind of sound. And it seemed to come from the other side of the room where I was sitting. It's a big room, a big sort of office where we all, during the day, would be quite busy with people working on their stories. So you can be easily deceived trying to discover where the sounds emanate from. A big old room with the window open, went over, closed the window shut. It was oddly distracting, kind of even more intrusive than the noise coming in. But it continued, and, I wonder, had someone left the radio on or a computer on at the desk in the far corner of the room? So I walked over to the empty desk, and the computer was switched off. There was no radio or speakers there. And then I noticed that the humming had stopped as I approached the corner where it had been coming from. So I returned to my desk. I thought, I must have imagined it. Sat down, and it started up again.
Oh,
so
sorry, the hairs are going up on the back of my arms here.
Yeah, it was a bit disconcerting. But look, there was a correspondent called in with a breaking story, so that distracted me. So I just, I realised then that afterwards thinking about it, that it had been going on in the background. When you think back afterwards,
sure,
to a sound. But it's kind of hard to describe the quality of it. It was this kind of disembodied voice. It wasn't like someone standing there humming aloud. It was like echoey. It seemed to hover somewhere between the desks and that old Georgian ceiling. So I went over again, and then it stopped abruptly. I walked away. It started up again, and it's just like it seemed like it must have been whoever or whatever entity was there was aware of my intrusion upon it. It didn't want that intrusion, so I just stayed over my side of the desk then from then on. So I just thought, well, look, I'm going to check around it. This is really strange. It happened again, and a second night. I went down to the floors below, thinking maybe somebody was a cleaning lady or something humming. No, the whole place was vacant. There was just empty studios. There was a little bit of, the music drifting out of the studio, nothing like the humming that was going on upstairs. Right down to the basement where all the old CDs. I was very brave when I think of it.
You were.
Go up the stairs and, nothing. Nobody at all. So it had stopped by the time I got back up. I suppose, the thing about it is, Mark, that, I had heard reports that used to be a hospital. As we know, the Jervis Street Hospital
sure.
used to be there on that particular place. And one of the reports was that, one of the suspicions was that, the nursery could have been based in the particular building that we were in, particular rooms that we were in, and maybe it was just echoes of echoes of the past of somebody,
like a lullaby,
singing the children to sleep. A lullaby. Yeah.
Could you determine whether it was male or female, Bernie?
It did seem to be female, yes. It did seem to be female, Mark. Yeah, it did seem to have a female quality to it. Very soft, very gentle, and just like somebody going about their business or singing to children. But look, it was, so on the last night that we were in, one of the last nights we were in that particular building, I sent an email to the staff saying, now that we're moving out of here, because I didn't want to freak anyone out before that, it seems like, I just want to say, I've been aware that this building may have been haunted, and I gave my experience. And one of the presenters picked up the story and interviewed me on his show. Then the interesting thing happened was that people were phoning in who worked in supermarkets and the shopping centre nearby, telling all the experiences that they'd had, and they were more shocking than mine, is all I can say.
So a very early spiritual Me Too movement. You became the story rather than the newsreader, because I do remember this went straight into the public sphere.
Yeah.
Did you have other stations queuing up to interview you, or? No,
it was just we went on with that for a while, and I don't know, some people were saying, that's a load of nonsense. There will be people who will be intrigued by it, and then there are people who just dismiss anything paranormal. Those are the responses that the presenter was getting. But yeah, and security men, you see, it's whoever's there late, I think, gets these things start to seem to kick off, Security men late in the evening. One of our engineers coming in the morning, reported that there were, the swivel chairs that the DJs sit on were spinning around for no apparent reason. Yeah. that was in the studios. And what else? Yeah, just people just generally got an eerie feeling in that particular room up the top where we did our news, you know.
Well, Bernie, the thing is as well, you and me, we go back, right? I can't really explain the special feeling you have. Some would say in radio circles, well, you're relegated to the graveyard scene, you know, which is appropriate. But there's something very special. You really feel, I don't know about you, but I used to feel, you know, in those wee small hours, I did a sunshine from kind of 12 midnight until 4 in the morning or something crazy like that, way back. And there'd be all newsreaders like you'd know, Claire McKeown and, Sybil Fennell and all those around. The Jervis Street, by the way, was notorious. I met a nurse there years ago. She told me a couple of stories about it. Number one, disembodied feet would run up and down to her fellow nurses, usually when someone was dying. Yeah, that was scary. Yeah. And, you know, like you, when you approached, the feet would run away. That was one. There was a kind of a funny one as well. Of course, these days you have to be careful, you know. But a very well-known Dublin businessman, this would have been in the 70s sometime, he suffered a heart attack and he was there in his lovely pinstriped suit, or so they thought, because, you know, in emergency procedure, they cut the clothes open and he had everything. He had the bra and the panties and the stockings and everything. So yeah, he was just short to whip, you know. But anyway, back to paranormal. That was just an aside. The other one that she told me was the priest giving the last rites to someone, and they were gathered around a bed and the body levitated a few feet up in the air during the last rites. And very, very, it was like someone was just putting it back down, and then it came down again. So you're in an area as well near Wolftone Park. There's a graveyard. Right. There's a church near there. There was a notorious guy called Normsby or something like that. Lord, he was a hanging judge. He'd actually he did for Robert Emmett. Oh. But nothing anyway, like in your new studios these days, Bernie, no?
No, that's what I would like to say, that whatever it was didn't follow us across to Marconi House. I don't get any sense of any presence there at all. I know it's a new building, but no. So maybe it's still there. I think there was a bit of disquiet because the story had gone public and they were trying to sell the building, and maybe we were putting people off with our ghost stories.
Yes.
But it did sell eventually, and I think it was bought by one of the department stores, and I haven't heard any, I suppose the thing is, like, offices might be just used 9 to 5, very loud, very busy. You wouldn't notice anything. You wouldn't really. It's only when everything goes quiet evening, then you become aware of, if there's something else there, you will become aware of it, very much so.
But in the wee small hours of the morning, there was Bernie Jameson and the disembodied voice. And that concludes our ghostly radio tale. So thank you so much, Bernie.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, a couple of things over the years, but I've learned, well, I suppose it's not learned, I've just become accustomed to it, and I think it's kind of, it's maybe another sense or something. But often when you go into places, you'll get a feeling for the place, and you'll get a feeling of whether or not it's comfortable. And whatever causes that, who knows what causes that, but we have an intuition, we have an inbuilt intuition. I can't describe what it is or where it comes from or the physics of it or the chemistry of it, but it's there, and anybody will tell you to stick with your intuition. If you think something doesn't feel right, then don't hang around.
Superb advice from regular contributor to Scary EIRE, David McGlynn, aka The Squire. And don't hang around either. If you've got an Irish paranormal tale to tell, simply email paranormalireland@protonmail.com and it'll be read out for you. Or you get to tell it on air yourself. That's paranormalireland@protonmail.com.
And my thanks to Bernie Jameson, who did that at very short notice. You know, she is such a lovely person and a very fine newsreader. Thanks so much, Bernie. I really appreciate your time. Now, during the week, as I said earlier, I had the honour of being interviewed by the hosts of the flagship show on Paranormal UK Radio, of course, Irene and Mark. And at one point, Irene said to me, I really would like to know about the Irish phenomenon that is the BANSHEE. Well, stick around, Irene, because into the archives I go, and I recorded this, about 2 years back. But tonight I'm going to talk to you about the Banshee. Some of you know the name Banshee. Some know it well, some know it vaguely. Pictures come to mind of an old lady combing her hair and crying, or keening as it's known. The phenomenon of the Banshee is ancient and it's primal in respect of Ireland. And it can attach itself, this phenomenon, this primal ancient phenomenon can attach itself to families over the generations and generations, and indeed, in some cases, follow them right across the sea. So what is the Banshee? Well, let me tell you my mother's story. My mother got to know a young girl who had arrived over from County Galway to the sanatorium, to Piemont Sanatorium, which I think was established in 1912. I think it still exists, although I don't know what its purpose is now. But it was this big, vast complex. And this girl had come across all the way from the rugged coast of the west of Ireland, County Galway, to be here in County Kildare. She too was suffering from tuberculosis. And they got to know each other. We'll call her Nancy, all right? She got to know Nancy well, and that was her girlhood friend. But Nancy was ailing and failing and fading away. She wasn't well at all. Her tuberculosis was quite advanced. And one day my mother said to her, "Nancy, are you all right?" And Nancy said to her, "No, Emily, I'm not. And I'll tell you something. It won't be long until the Banshee comes for me." Now, my mother probably didn't even know what a Banshee was, and didn't even register what was going to happen. And a week or two passed, and they shared a little room together with kind of like little bunk beds and beds on either side, whatever the setup was. And in the morning, in the very early, late at night, early morning, Nancy was over her side of the room, and my mother awoke to a ferocious noise which was emanating right over the bed from where Nancy was still sleeping peacefully. And my mother described the noise. It was an auditory phenomenon. She didn't see any Banshee doing her hair, but she heard this force, this phenomenon which hung over Nancy's bed. She described it as a mixture of a human in pain and a beast and an animal. This merging of sound which terrified my mother. Her hair was standing on her head, listening to this cacophony across the room, which was like a mixture of caterwauling and, let's call it what it was, keening. The keening, the crying, the release, the catharsism in getting out of the state of grief, of loss. That is the Banshee, the cry of the Banshee. And it hung over Nancy's bed for several minutes. Several minutes. It could have been as much as 10 minutes. But my mother stuck to her guns in relating this story to me throughout the years. But she wasn't given to exaggeration, because this was, on top of the trauma she was having as being ill, this was a terrible fright that she got. This cloying, animalistic grief, purgative of pain and suffering and loss. That is what the Banshee is, boys and girls. That's what it is. And it's quite a natural phenomenon, although I'm sure if you encountered it, like my late mother did, it would be both terrifying and unnerving. and all those things, but eventually the cacophony rose and flowed and gradually ebbed away. Nancy still asleep, oblivious to it all. And you can probably guess she wasn't long for this world once the Banshee had paid its visit. A few days afterwards, Nancy died. And you know, her father was so poor that he drove across all the way, that's 300 miles or so over from Galway. And there and back he had a coffin on the top of his car, tied down, and that was for Nancy. And he took her back to County Galway in the coffin, strapped to the top of the old banger of a car that he had. And that was the end of lovely Nancy. And that was the end of the Banshee my mother told me about all those years later. Mother, I will remember you. I will remember the love you gave me. And your presence lives on in one of your granddaughters who's very like you, Mum. But tonight, on Scary Era, I thank you for telling me that story, which stuck with me all those years. She never wavered from it, and I never doubted her, and I never doubted the phenomenon of the Banshee, and neither should you. Mother, I will remember you. I bet you're cacking yourselves in England and pooping yourselves in the United States. And so you should be. Welcome to Scary Era, the podcast you can eat between meals. Now, after all that gravitas, I think it's about time we lightened the mood with, of all people, a taxi man, and a very great taxi man he is. His name is Neil Murray. Let me spell that. Neilmurray. Never hurry a Murray, especially when they're in the middle of a good tale. He has become something of a phenomenon on TikTok in Ireland, amassing, close to 40,000 followers, as he despairs at what's happening to his country from the cockpit of his motor every day. He's there. He makes us laugh, and he can make us cry as well, as he deals very sensitively at times with certain issues that come across his windshield or windscreen or whatever you call it. He's a great guy, and he's very, very down to earth, and it all gets a bit too much for him at times, so much so that he smacks his head with a newspaper. Now, that loses a lot in translation. You haven't even seen Peanut, his puppet, yet, but Neil Murray, I managed to have the honour of speaking to him earlier this week.
No, but I tell you what, I had a guy in the car before, all right, and he told me a story, okay, and he was telling me a friend of his is a taxi driver, And one night he was dropping them home, and it was near a pub called the Dead Man's Inn pub. Now, the Dead Man's Inn pub is known. It's really called that because it was on a main road, as far as I know, and people, used to get knocked down outside, and that's why it's called the Dead Man's Inn pub. He was telling me that one night his friend, the taxi driver, dropped this guy home, okay, and it was more or less near the Dead Man's Inn pub. And he went in, and he said, I'll be out in a few minutes and I'll pay it. And he said, okay, no problem. So 5-10 minutes went, so he got out of the car and he went in, and he said to the lady, he said, Harry, I just dropped the chap home here. He said, I just want to get paid. He said, I need to head off. She said, you didn't drop anybody here. He says, I did. I seen him walking in here. She said, no. She said, I don't. So she hold on a second, she said. So she brought a photograph out to him. Was that the man? And he says, yeah, that's him. So he died 18 years ago, just over there outside the Dead Man's Inn pub. He got knocked down. So there you go. That's one story anyway.
God.
So, and then I also had a gentleman in the car, and he was telling me he was going out with a girl years ago, and for all of a sudden he was sitting in the apartment, and all of a sudden he seen right in front of the TV was just a head, and he jumped up.
Oh.
He said he ran.
She lost her head. Yeah.
He said he looked like myself. He was bald. He said he looked like Royce Head or Royce Head Fred.
It's the way you tell him, Neil.
Royce Head Fred. It's the way you tell him. I know. But he said he ran out of that apartment and he never come back to see that apartment either. And that's basically it. Now listen, Mark, I'm going to tell you a couple more, okay? Just my sister.
Keep going, I'm all ears.
My sister.
You're in the driving seat on this one, Neil. You're in the driving seat.
Make sure you got your seatbelt on and fasten your condom.
Yeah, my sister was 10 at the time. I was 8, 1978. And she went into my mother and father one night, and in 1978, she was roaring and crying. She said she was actually been talking to my granny at the end of the bed. And my mum said, you were just dreaming, get into the bed in the middle of us. So that was that. So the next morning we get to knock at the door saying my granny was dead. Oh. So my mum had said to her, what did she say to you? She said, tell your mum that everything is okay, that she's happy up here in heaven with her granddad. And there you go. I'm going to tell you what I was told. That's all I'm saying, Mark.
Can I tell you this, Neil? Right, this is episode 2 of Scary Era, and we've already had the granny appearing story. I'm just saying it's happened. A guy sat in this studio with me last week, and he'd seen his granny his grandmother looking at him from the ceiling, although he didn't even know who she was at the time, but he described her to his mum. And have you any more stories, Neil?
Yeah, one story, something happened in John, where we were living, myself and the wife. How long? We were only 2 years together, 3 years together. I was 27 years together now. She's still mad about me, and I get that, Mark. I understand that.
You're a very virile man, if you don't mind me saying so.
But anyway, I was in having a shower, and I heard someone calling me, and I thought it was Lorraine. I was drying myself, and I went down to Lorraine, what? I'm just having a shower, I'm just drying myself. She said, what? So you called me? I didn't call you. I said, you did call me. I said, I'm in the shower. You called me. She said, I didn't call you. And then I realised when I kept it up, someone called me, but it wasn't her. They said, I'm only joking away. And she started crying. I said, Lorraine, I was thinking of something else. Don't worry about it, Grant. But to this day, this was 25 years ago, someone called me in that house.
It's interesting you said that, Neil, because very rarely, maybe once every 2 or 3 years, I hear my mother, my late mother, who was deceased since 2011.
Yeah.
I hear Mark. I hear her as clear as I'm hearing you. It's really weird. I don't know what that is. And the other thing I had, you just reminded me of something bizarre happening in your own house. This is true. Now, my wife and daughters will just roll their eyes. But Sunday morning, I'm a bit of a you. I love the woman I'm with, right? So I make her breakfast on Sunday mornings, and she sits up there with her diary and her little laptop, and she does all the keeping the house together and stuff. So I bring her up breakfast. About 2 years ago, I've one of those toasters that has 4 slots in it, and I had 4 bits of toast in it, ready to go for her. And you can probably guess what happened. I mean, I came up, I bought her up something. I said, "Oh, hang on, I'll go down and I'll get your toast." Went down, nothing in, and we're not out on the road or anything like that. No toast in the toaster. Now, look, was it just a genuine mistake? I just was so, it was in my head. You know when you know, and like I kind of know I had 4 bits of toast in the bloody thing. So who knows, Neil? Who knows?
There's a hungry ghost in the house.
What you call it, a poltergeist as well. Now that's the stuff that freaks me out.
Yeah.
The old poltergeist. Yeah. Take care,
Max,
because I care.
Anytime you want to talk to me about that, just let me know.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll meet you for a coffee anytime, buddy, because I get bored out of my box in here. See ya. Take care.
Thanks a lot, pal.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Ah, yes. Thank you, Neil Murray, Master of the Universe. And hello to his long-suffering missus as well, Lorraine. How do you put up with that, Lorraine? Huh? I'm joking. Yeah. Listen, Neil Murray is his name, and you'll get him at TikTok Taxi. On TikTok, of course. So, I need your help, and I need it in a big way. The only way I'm going to be able to grow this fledgling show, Scary EIRE, and if you don't know, EIRE is the Irish word for Ireland, is with your participation. And for that, I need you to reach out to me with your paranormal tales, particularly if they've got an Irish slant. You know, maybe you listen to your old grey Irish grandmother or father when you were sitting on their knee as a bairn, as we'd say, as a child, and they tell you these old stories about the even older country, Ireland, the Emerald Isle. So look, please contact me. Please! I'm begging you. Not going to have a show unless you participate. And what you do is you email paranormalireland@protonmail.com. Simple as that. I can read your story out, or like the people who've participated tonight, I can give you a call, and we could do it all on air, and everybody can hear your dulcet tones. Won't that be exciting? Say yes. Of course it will. Us Irish. Aren't we great? Oh, we do love ourselves. So then, next up.
Churalura basket case. Would you strap me to a pig and roll me in the mud?
Sure, it's only David McGlynn, a.k.a. the Squire. He's down in the bowels of Scary EIRE. Let's just see what he has to come up with in relation to gangs fighting in Old Ireland.
Hello, Squire. Are you down there? Oh, look, he is. And he's gone all thespian.
A set of fellows of the lowest description, frequenting Ormond Market, assistants and carriers from slaughterhouses, joined by cattle drivers from Smithfield, and stable boys, helpers, porters and idle drunken vagabonds in the neighbourhood of Ormond Quay, formed a body of fighting men, armed with falchions, as they call them. Falchions are oak staves of casks, hardened by smoking in chimneys. They are sharpened on one side, and a hole is cut in one end to admit a hand to answer for a handle. Some preferred shillelaghs, but all were armed for combat. They were prepared to meet the Liberty Boys, a set of lawless desperadoes residing in the opposite side of the town called the Liberty. Those were of a different breed, being chiefly unfortunate weavers without employment. Some were habitual and willful idlers. They were slow to work, but they were quick at rioting and uproar. No two armies in ancient days could have felt more glowing spirit, inveterate hatred, or obstinate resolution to die or conquer than those two parties of brutal combatants. And they could give no reason for their abominable destructive aversion to each other, other than the Ormonds should subdue the Liberties, and vice versa. Unfortunately for the citizens of Dublin, Sunday was fixed upon for the awful conflict, and until this fight was over, no person dare venture into the streets. There were several patches of waste ground near the environs, but at some distance from each other, and it was in a secret on what ground they were going to meet, until the action had nearly begun. As soon as the discovery was made, notice was given to the chief magistrates and the Lord Mayor, his sheriffs, which were nearest the field of battle. Then a body of soldiers were, under the direction of one of those civil officers, led to disperse them. They were often obliged to fire on them before they could put them to flight, as it was found the best plan. There was so much trouble and expense in imprisoning them and bringing them to trial. This monstrous evil, I well remember, lasted for years, and could not be or wasn't put down until the police were established. Heretofore there weren't any police.
Ooh, I'll never look at my big shillelagh in the same way again. Too much information. And now the squire isn't quite finished, because he's got a story about hanging postmen. Yeah, and one of them was called MacLivery, who failed to make a delivery, and guess what happened to him?
1784, Parliament passed legislation introducing the death penalty for robbing the mails. The 1784 Postal Act stands out in this period as one of the harshest pieces of legislation ever enacted against working people convicted of theft. Between 1784 and 1795, postal workers were brought to court on 4 occasions and accused of robbing the mail. 3 of these trials resulted in the hangings of 4 people. Even before the 1784 Postal Act was passed, however, the postal authorities took a tough stance against their own workforce. In May 1782, it was reported that a letter carrier named Crinion had been hanged, and that a postal clerk named Knox had been sentenced to be hanged, but was respited on condition that he transport himself out of Europe for the rest of his life. Alexander MacLivery, a boy who carried the express between Dublin and Drogheda, was the first postal worker to be hanged under the Postal Act of 1784. In November 1785, MacLivery was arrested on charges of stealing lottery tickets out of a letter with the intention of negotiating them. He was committed to Newgate Prison to face trial, his second trial for the offence. He had been acquitted at the first trial. After his initial release, Justice Francis Graham discovered stolen mail at the boys' stable in Drogheda. MacLivery had sworn examinations against 2 innocent men, but these charges were dropped upon his arrest. The King's Bench convicted the postal boy. He was executed at the front of Newgate Prison on Saturday, the 18th of March, 1786, by hanging.
Yikes! Hung by the neck until you are dead.
For a few lottery tickets. Sheesh. Thank you, David McGlynn, and your beautiful voice. David McGlynn, also known as the Squire. You know, when I knew him way back in the early 90s, women used to go absolutely mad for him. And I was jealous, I was. He had this kind of striking look about him. Oh, yes. Very dapper and debonair is our David. Back in a roly-mo, where we'll talk about a particular nasty form of torture used in Ireland, as well as some scary places at night that you and I really, at this point, need to talk about. Scary EIRE. EIRE is the Irish or Gaelic word for Ireland. Do you know much about this ancient land? In recent times, its Irish culture has revolved around the likes of U2, Pierce Brosnan and Colin Farrell, and of course the literary genius types of William Butler Yeats and James Joyce. They're all world-renowned, but it's a mystical place, this Ireland, from its druids to its Christianity, and also brutal, surviving famine and invasion after invasion. Vikings, Normans, and the English. We've seen them all come, and we've seen them all off. Cheerio! Your ancestors kept your names close as over the rugged seas they fled to eke out a living or fight someone else's war. Paranormal means all the things that are impossible to explain by known natural forces or by science. And Ireland is steeped in lore. Ghosts, blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, hunger, desperation, and charm. Oh, and the paranormal. Welcome to Scary EIRE.
Not paranormal. Mark Manning is real. Now that's a scary thought.
Thank you, Your Royal Snideness. When I want your opinion, I shall ask for it. In light of what David McGlynn just described about hanging for the sake of a few lottery tickets, it was a very brutal Ireland that was occupied for many years by the British, and of course we had Vikings and Normans and Danes, oh my, into the mix as well. But one of the tortures that came to my attention was called pitch capping. Pitch capping, it says here, is a form of torture which involves pouring hot pitch or tar, mainly used at the time for waterproofing seams in the sides of ships and boats, into a conical paper cap, you know, like folks, a dunce's cap, and forcing it onto the individual's head, which is then allowed to cool before being rapidly removed. Typically, victims of pitch capping suffer loss of skin and tissue around their head. I suppose it's like scalping, huh? The practice of pitch capping, that's what my barber does to me. The practice of pitch capping dates back to the period of classical antiquity, but was used most prominently during the suppression of, wait for it, the Irish Rebellion of 1798. Pitch capping was usually preceded by the hasty shaving of the victim's hair, and the effect it had resembled scalping in the injuries inflicted. In other forms of pitch capping, pitch or tar was poured into the victim's orifices instead. Though since doing so invariably proved fatal, this was more akin to a form of execution instead. Another form of pitch capping involved smearing cloth or a piece of paper with pitch and pressing it onto the head of the victim. Society of United Irishmen member Miles Byrne described pitch capping in his memoirs. Flogging, half-hanging, picketing were mild tortures in comparison of the pitch caps that were applied to the heads of those who happened to wear their hair short, called croppies. And for those of you who remember Irish history, there's a phrase, croppy lie down. The head being completely singed, a cap made of strong linen, well imbued with boiling pitch, was so closely put on that it could not be taken off without bringing off a part of the skin and flesh from the head. In many instances, the tortured victim had one of his ears cut off, to satisfy the executioner that if he escaped he could readily be discovered, being so well marked. There you go. You could claim genius, or being an artist. You could say, hey, I'm Van Gogh, or is it Van Gogh? I can never tell. I do need your help in order to grow this Scary Era podcast. And all as you've got to do is, if you've got an Irish ghost story or paranormal, supernatural experience, doesn't exclusively have to be Irish. Don't exclude yourself if it's good. But anyway, get in touch with me here by emailing paranormalireland@protonmail.com. paranormalireland@protonmail.com. Tell us your story. You tell me, I'll tell them. Alternatively, I can arrange to contact you and record it, and we shall broadcast it right here on Paranormal UK Radio, on Scary Era. Yes, I did mention earlier on that I want to talk about a few places. Now, a great buddy of mine, he's very shy at times, but his name is Stephen Taylor. Steve is currently over in the States, where he spends a lot of time. I think he's out Seattle way at the moment. He spent a lot of time with Microsoft in his day. But he's still in IT, and we're great buddies, boyhood friends. And when I started Scary Era initially, you'll see some videos up on YouTube if you care to look for them. It was just in my head, I had to do it. And it was Paranormal UK with Mark and Irene who gave me the opportunity to put a proper structure on it as a podcast. So I'm very grateful, guys. But as I said, there's early versions of it in video up on YouTube. Just go Mark Manning Scary Era. Steve and I would visit places of note, almost like ghost hunters, but not really, because we're not into that kind of, hysterical kind of stuff. Not at all. We're very level-headed. In fact, I always say there's no need to, I'm so excited. No, there's no need for any of that stuff, because if you are in a place, noteworthy place, a historic place at night, whether you see something or not, and the likelihood is you won't, you are within the environs of a place of happenings. You know, it's not made up. Things happened in those places. That's why they become notorious to some degree. And we have found ourselves, Stephen and I, in an old graveyard or two at night. One of them was used for, it's a military graveyard in Wicklow. And there are victims of both, or fatalities of both world wars there. And indeed, I think one or two spies, sailors that were washed up on shore, or Luftwaffe airmen who crashed during the war, are all respectively laid out there. And Steve and I went there at night. And it's a beautiful spot, small enough. And just took it all in, really. Not going to get, as I said, extreme about it. It was what it was, to be there at night. And also we've been in Merrion Graveyard, which dates from, I think, maybe the late 1500s, where quite a few sailors are buried. They were all drowned on Dublin Bay, which is just about half a mile away from where I'm speaking to you, in 1807, around the time of the Napoleonic threat or wars. Quite a few of these guys were from Mayo. They were like a militia or a yeomanry, I think. And they were apparently, allegedly, locked below decks during a storm, which happened around Christmas time, as I said, in 1807. The storm was appallingly bad, and they were drowned. And, I think another ship went down that night as well. I'll get all the details soon, and we'll talk about it. And in total, I think it was 300 people drowned that night, between sailors and militia and officers. Of course, some of the officers managed to escape on a boat. That's another story. But it's just these places. You know, just go to them. Rathfarnham Castle is a place I like as well. There's a story there about a lady who was found in the 1800s who had been, for a couple of 100 years, walled up there. It's more a reinforced house. It's a big castle though, but it's a house originally. And she was found in a yellow ball gown. The Yellow Lady, I think she's called. And every time I go to Rathfarnham Castle, I feel the history of the place. And of course, the notorious Hellfire Club. For those of you listening in the UK and England, there's a Hellfire Club there as well. And these were places of, I suppose you'd call them, what's the term these days, elitists? The elite. You know, basically the rich and idle who'd nothing better to do than cavort around the place, have orgies and get... Yeah, they were just a wild bunch of aristocrats. And the Hellfire Club is it's in County Wicklow in Ireland, or maybe just up in the Dublin Hills there. And Google it, Hellfire Club Dublin. And of course, people come over from all corners of the world with their little spirit boxes. Can I let you into a secret about those spirit boxes? You know, the ones that give away random names as you switch them on. I am a voiceover artist. Check me out sometime, markmanningmedia.com. It's what I do. And every so often I get these, what are known as, they're a script, but they're known as prompts. And prompts are just a jungled pile of, a pile of, unrelated names and words. And I just get paid for reading them out. And suddenly they'll appear in spirit boxes, I'm sure, or some similar devices. Like, the ones you talk to and ask, what are you going to have for breakfast this morning? Alexa! Those kind of things. Yeah, prompts they're known as. And that's why it really annoys me when I see so-called ghost hunters, base their whole investigation on what they're hearing from me and people like me who months before recorded these disjointed words. And they're going, oh, he said John. Oh, he said midnight. Oh, hanging. Oh, death. Death. Did somebody die here? Quick, stop the lights. Listen, it's just after going woof, woof. Yeah, it is, because Mark Manning and other voiceover artists have gone woof woof. Another place we visited recently is called the Black Castle. It's in Wicklow again. What is it with me and Wicklow? Well, Steve is kind of based there. And that was an amazing place. It goes all the way back to the Normans, I think. And people were flung off rocks there and had their limbs smashed. And you can feel it. You know, it's like a stump of a place, but you feel the oppression of it, especially at night. And of course, you're on heightened alert with your sensitivities and stuff. But yeah, you do get an atmosphere. As a matter of fact, I just reminded myself, I was in Barbados years ago, and I was a corporate sales guy at the time, so we'd have these incentive trips, and we went all over the world and were treated like royalty, 5-star. And in Barbados, there was a sugar, well, I'm sure there were many, but there was a plantation. I found myself there at night with a group of colleagues and their partners, and the stars there, you know, when there's no light pollution, you can really see stars like you won't see them anywhere else. Maybe out in the desert you will, but, you know, that kind of amazing night show you will get. And we were sitting there, but I could feel the oppression of the place. It was a sugar plantation. And of course, it had been run by slaves that had been carried away in captivity many hundreds of years ago. So even though it was all lovely and twee and exciting and lavish and luxurious, like a banquet under the stars, you could not escape what had happened in that place. The Hellfire Club, by the way, is interesting. You will find me on video if you do look for Scary Era Hellfire Club. I'm going to take the audio of it, though, and play it here on the podcast, because you'll get the sense, you know, you'll get the sense of being in situ, there, at night. And I still think it's one of the most invigorating things I ever did in my life. I'll always be grateful to Steve for that, because Steve doesn't take crap from anybody. He's a big, tough guy, you know. He's very physical, and he was a sailor in his time, still sails, and just a guy you wouldn't mess with. So I'm like the little, save me, Steve. But we're there anyway, in the Hellfire Club. And the cavorting and carousing that went on there, not to mention black masses and stuff, it's all there. The history is there. And as I said, I'll get the audio up soon. But to have the wind howling around you and going, you know, through your hair. We had a dog with us that night as well, lovely big black Labrador called Luna, an American one. Steve took it from America to Ireland. And that was pretty amazing. And then it must have been about 1:45 in the morning. We heard a group of people coming up. Steve didn't flinch. I was, let's get out of here. I think we've outstayed our welcome. You know, that kind of thing you get in your throat. I think we better go, Steve. Steve's going, why? And I just looked, I don't know who those people are. Oh, you're such a chicken. Walk, let me out of here. Well, I didn't know. There, you know, someone was stabbed up there a few years ago. Apparently a guy felt he'd been possessed and just stabbed people he was only talking to, strangers he'd met and was talking to them, and then he pulls a knife on them. What am I going to do? Again, please, let's hear your stories. If you have Irish lineage, if you're listening to this in Ireland, the old sod itself, I want to hear from you. I want to put your paranormal story up there. And you can do that by emailing paranormalireland@protonmail.com. Let's be hearing from you. Now look, I get it. Not everybody believes in this stuff. And I'll be honest with you, neither would I. But something happened to me, as you all know, if you heard the first episode, in around 1974 or 1975, something like that, when I came face to face with someone from another era. Cliched and all as it was, you know, with a dark cloak, I physically saw a lady from, I would say, the 1800s, looking at me. Not going to tell it all over again as filler material. It's all there in episode 1. But that's why I'm here doing what I do. And I think a lot of people have seen or experienced anomalies. Let's just call it that. That's a nice American word, isn't it? Anomaly. And keep it to themselves. It's only when you ask them, have you seen anything? Some of them look around left and right and then go, actually, I did. So stories range from everything. I think animals, cats, are great barometers. I mean, we've all seen our cat look at stuff that we can't see. Cat gets, indeed, we had a listener, a caller on the first show telling us this, that his cat used to look at the library area of the house where books kept being placed on a bed or something. And the cat would see things and be looking left and right. I've seen that. I've seen my cat get spooked. We've 2 cats. And one of them, both of them, when we have candlelight in the conservatory, I don't know whether it's just the candlelight does it, but they kind of skip in a frightened way and dash about. And they're not like kittens. These things have been around, a bit like myself. So there you have it. You know, in summary, some of the places that I've been, I didn't mention Monkstown Castle, which is quite an interesting place, not too far from here. Again, you'll see it on YouTube, and again, I'll maybe try and pull the audio from it for here. That was interesting. So, anyway, in summary, so Monkstown Castle, the Black Castle, the Hellfire Club, the German War Cemetery, and as well as that, we were in a graveyard in Wicklow at night as well, where we think there was pirates buried, and then the old Merrion graveyard with all the shipwreck victims in it as well. So it's a fine old place, this Ireland. Steve himself had an anomaly happen to him. I'm going to try and get him to tell it himself. It's an auditory type phenomenon. Every time I say that, I want to go doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Phenomenon. Doo-doo-doo. Anyway, you got the picture. It happened in Limerick, County Limerick, about 3 or 4 years ago. He was with his daughter at the time, and rather than me tell the story, I'll try and get him to do that as well. So now, anything at all you want to talk about in relation to supernatural, paranormal, ghostly happenings in Ireland, or with an Irish history to them, and as I said, not exclusively so, because I want to tell you this before I forget it. I voice over and occasionally I do film. And I was asking a director recently, or producer, a Dutch gentleman, I said, have you ever had anything paranormal? And he said, when we were starting out as students in film, we did a kind of Blair Witch type project. And they ended up in a house, I can't remember exactly what it's called, something Sands. Anyway, it's on the border of Belgium and Holland. I think this gentleman is Belgian. And he said, the stuff that happened to us there. So even tonight, as I was editing away here, I was on Instagram and I got him. And he said he will talk to us. So I do look forward to that. Now, I hope you've enjoyed the show. Feedback would be good. You know where to get me at this stage. I want you to sleep well and to always remember, whatever it is, it will pass. You know, I've seen people take their lives recently, 4 that I would be very aware of. You know, and you just want to go, look, I know it's tough, but it will pass. My name is Mark Manning. It's been a pleasure presenting Scary EIRE to you. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to hear from you. Goodbye. God bless and take care, 'cause I care. Good night.